Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next Superstock live stream, September 2nd. We are back with Tetra Bio-Pharma, TBPMF. For anybody that's brand new to our live streams, our goal is to bring you those stocks which have that 10x to 100x upside potential. Companies going after massive multi-billion-dollar market opportunities that are at a key inflection point in their growth cycle and with multiple catalysts in place to ignite that shareholder value, stock prices. TBP, Tetra Bio-Pharma, definitely fits the bill. We've seen the stock already moving up. Exciting news today, which we're going to get into. We're going to kind of do an update of a bit of a slide presentation for anybody that's new, and then we're going to go into a lot of Q&A. So again, the whole idea of these programs is for you to ask your questions and then decide for yourself if Tetra Bio-Pharma is going to be that next 10x to 100x stock. We've already had 7 of these 10 baggers or 50 baggers even in the last months, and we're waiting for the first 100 bagger. We're hearing that that Tetra has the potential. We're hearing different numbers. So with that said, Guy, again, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Jack.
Absolutely. So what I want to do is I want to kind of start off with, if you can just go into, tell us what the significance of today's news announcement on, the medical authority granting the SAA, Scientific Advisory Assessment. What is the significance of that for Tetra? And then we'll go into you'll share the deck, and then we'll go into the Q&A.
Absolutely. Actually, most people who probably read the news release, I mean, we tried to make it as simple as we can. It's a very technical, obviously, event, but if you were a pharmaceutical company or a research analyst, I mean, this rang bells. So I'll go over kind of each paragraph very simply. So the first one, when we talk about our non-clinical program, every new drug that gets approved to the market, we have a series of toxicology studies that have to be done. That includes reproductive toxicology, chronic exposure, does it cause cancer? How does it, change the genes? All of the science. Well, you need to address it, even for a botanical like cannabis that's been around, say, for centuries. There's a lot published on it. So your first reaction is, well, no, you don't need to address anything. But the regulator looks at the science and says, okay, but these weren't well done. These weren't, didn't meet the standards of the pharmaceutical industry in terms of research. So you've got to negotiate with them how you're going to bridge to, say, the knowledge that's out there. And it's important because you've got to communicate adequately the risks to a patient. So, for example, is there going to be any danger to a pregnant woman who decides to consume, say, Quick-Sleep? I have to communicate those risks very precisely to them so they understand that risk. And that has to be written, in, let's say, plain language on what we call the label of the product. So we presented our program to the authority. We've done the same with the FDA and Health Canada. And basically, they came back, recognized everything we've done, everything we're going to do, and basically, gave us let's say, a passing grade A on our program. And that for us is fantastic because this is all done, the development of the programs is all in-house, and it's all to the way we deal with showing how safe, say, Quick-Sleep is to a regulator. The next one is on what we call the quality. So this is all the manufacturing aspect. Again, sounds easy to people. They say, well, there's a lot of medical cannabis manufacturers, but in fact, the medical cannabis manufacturers don't meet the pharmaceutical requirements even in Europe. By that, I mean, you can get a certification. Some licensed producers, growers of cannabis have obtained GMP status for, say, growing the plant, making the oil, but not making what we call a finished drug product under the regulations. Tetra in Canada got our first recognition by Health Canada in July of 2018. So we've been at this game now for a long time. Recently, another Canadian company got it for CBD as a finished product. So it's very, very few players out there that can actually meet the regulations. Now, if you're dealing with a single molecule, it's, let's say, relatively easy to meet all of the requirements of the regulations. Now, when you're dealing with a complex inhaled product like Quicksleeve, there's a lot of issues you need to be sure the regulator, in this case, the European Medicines Agency, is going to agree with your approach of how you're addressing each requirement. So again, they basically gave us a very high grade in our program, and for us, that's excellent news, because we spend a lot of money each year on the manufacturing and the direction we're going to take Quicksleeve as a global prescription drug. And right now our targets is the United States, Canada, and Europe, and that's huge for a biotech company. Then the third and last part is really the clinical program. So obviously we want to be sure if I run a clinical trial in the United States or Canada or even Europe, that the EMA is going to say, okay, we agree with what the design of the study, but we also agree with the number of patients in the study, and we agree with the primary endpoints, because in the end, my claim that I'm defending has to be proven by the primary endpoint. So they basically reviewed all of our protocols, provided some guidance on the clinical, but overall, again, gave us an excellent, you could say, grade on our science and where we're going. So for us, we're very happy now. We just need to, let's say, optimize what we do in the United States versus Europe, and then keep our focus in bringing Quicksleeve all the way to the market.
Okay, so basically, so Malta, just Malta's basically, so that's the gateway to the European market, essentially.
Yeah, so basically in Europe, it's kind of like if each state in the United States had its own FDA. So in Europe, you can go to a single country to speak to them and get kind of the opinion. It's the same directive, they call the same law, basically. That's for a centralized procedure, but there's also other procedures you can look at, like decentralized procedures. It gets very complex, but to keep it simple, you're basically talking to the European agency and getting the feedback, because it's the same law. So we chose Malta. We have a good relationship there with them, and we plan obviously on running trials in Europe, including Malta. So that's our, let's say, entry point.
So it's actually it's pretty strong validation for TBP to get this to get this deal with Malta right now.
Correct. It's
so I think the key takeaway for investors is that this news, this milestone, really, I mean, it further de-risks kind of the Tetra story. And again, like with any biotech, any pharma, drug discovery play, the key is the value in the stock is created, as the company kind of climbs that ladder towards approval, as things get de-risked. So, in other words, the stock doesn't have to, you don't need the approval. You don't need to have the final drug approval for the stock to go to $10. Right. It could happen in theory $4 or $5 as I mean
the right term is de-risked, because you're correct. A shareholder has no way of knowing that my toxicology program or even the Quicksleeve itself, the way we manufacture it, meets the European standard to be approved as a prescription drug. So we're not talking about medical cannabis. We're talking about a prescription drug of cannabis. So this is very different. So now basically the agency is saying, well, your tox program will meet the requirements and your manufacturing quality program meets the requirement. And if you do these protocols and obviously you win in the protocol, then obviously you become approvable. So yes, for an outside person, that becomes really a blessing, say, of de-risking the path forward.
Okay, so this, I mean, look, bottom line is Tetra has achieved a lot of milestones in the last, 3, 4, 5 months. So things are really on track now. What I'd like to do is I want to have you run through, maybe go through the presentation real quick, because we do have a lot of new people today. Everybody's back from the summer vacation, so we'll go through that, and then we'll open up for Q&A. We got a bunch of questions piled up, so I hope you have time. We have like a ton of questions.
Yeah, certainly. I maybe just make one comment before I run the slides, because I know it's not in the slides. But obviously our Reduvo program, which also would be, how can I say, a significant step in terms of our valuation, is moving along. So obviously the reviewer the reviewers, the regulator. Health Canada is still going through it. So we're in the final stage, the scientific review. So I think that's, this is going to be also a major game changer. But people need to keep in mind, again, from a de-risking point of view, the moment we entered the scientific review, we've decreased tremendously the risk that our application, will make it to the end. So we're really doing well from this point of view. So we're in line to be the first company in Canada to get a prescription THC product on the market, which again, for patients and physicians is major, because the majority of physicians right now, do not want to recommend medical cannabis to patients because for them, it's the risk, because they don't know that medical cannabis, what is the risk to my patient? They don't know that. Whereas something that gets a DIN, drug identification number, they know what it means. They know you've met that toxicology standard, you've met that quality standard, and obviously you've met that clinical standard that every other prescription drug has in the past. So that's 2 for us already this year, that we've really de-risked our, let's say, milestone delivery.
Okay. So that said, I get your slides on the screen, and you could,
jump straight to,
take it away. Yes.
Yeah. So obviously Tetra, like we announced at the annual General Assembly, people have known us for a long time as a company. Our major focus right now is the quick sleeve, and the reason why is there's a major battle, you could say, to find alternatives to opioids, especially these immediate release opioids. And even the NIH this year identified to the pharmaceutical industry that finding non-addictive, safe alternatives to opioids was really of primary importance to society. So this is what we are addressing with our Reborn trial, even our Plenitude trial. So this for us has been and continues to be the number one priority. Now with Europe, the EMA basically waving a green flag saying, go, you're basically in the final race, to make it to the market. That for us means we need to refocus highly on Reborn and be sure that, we deliver everything on this. So pain management is really a key one. I think most of our shareholders came into Tetra hoping quick sleeve would eventually make it to the market. So I think, again, your phrase of de-risking it for them, the news release of this morning is basically that they're seeing that the work we're doing is getting very good grades from the regulator. So that's important. So our key markets, obviously acute and chronic pain. And then obviously we also have our drug for acute respiratory distress syndrome, cytokine release syndromes, which are major unmet medical needs. And obviously on the back burner, in a sense, has been our PP03, our ocular drug. But keep in mind, everything I do on the safety front, toxicology front, manufacturing front for the ARDS 003, I'm moving along my asset of PP03. So it's not that it's really idle from a value point of view. It's gaining value because it's being de-risked from a safety point of view as we move forward, basically the ARDS 003. So our markets, major markets, we've gone over this multiple times. Obviously, the ARDS market is 132 billion. Ophthalmics are smaller at about 31 billion. And the pain is at 77 billion. Right now, just the market of what we're tackling with just the Reborn trial, the immediate release, you're at a 16 billion market potential just for those opioids. So that, to me, is a very important outcome. If we can break that, that's going to be really, really major. So our patents, all of our patents, we have granted patents. So not many biotechs actually have, granted patents. They have a lot of provisional patents, patents that have just made to the PCT stage. But for example, the US has not approved them. So we have both. We have some that are in the review and we have others that have been approved. And that's significant because if they are approved, we become basically the precedent for these and for those claims. So that for us gives us a very solid position in our products. And this includes, we have provisional patents that were filed for even composition of matter for our quick sleeve drug and even comms, which will follow right after. And maybe for shareholders, a lot of them are curious what's happening to comms. Well, comms is kind of the same approach as the PP03. Keep in mind, we've bridged quick-sleep and COMS, so patients who would say receive quick-sleep or receive COMS would receive the same amount and same blend of cannabinoids. So there is a regulatory strategy built in that whatever I'm doing with quick-sleep, I'm also in a sense moving my COMS forward. So if COMS, say once quick-sleep is approved with a DIN type of, drug approval, then we can trigger a bridge and COMS can basically go to the market much faster than had it started, say, at square one type of thing and moving forward. So our products are very well protected. We license in high capacity manufacturing for cannabinoids because, look at one of the challenges the industry have. There's some biologics, for example, that had some reasonable, say, outcomes in ARDS and COVID patients, but the problem they have, per dose, it's something like $10,000, and they have a huge problem in providing this to all over the world. Even look at today, globally, I think it's 3% of the globe's population has been vaccinated. I mean, supply is a major issue. So as a business, we want to be sure we have a drug that will be reasonably priced for patients and that we can attain global sales. And obviously with a product like COMS, that is key. So we licensed in that technology to be able to do that. Obviously, COVID offset a bit our moving forward with the VidiPrint technology, but once borders open up and the bridge is moving very well for COMS, and obviously at one point we will begin to prepare and to set up COMS that way. Our PP02, which is now called the Reduvo Adversa, that's the next one after Reduvo. Obviously, you can start to see through Tetra now that there's always a regulatory strategy behind it. So kind of like when Reduvo, say, gets approved, I kind of now have, a first step, and I can readily execute a bridge both in Canada and the USA to bring, say, PP02 very rapidly, which would be a fully patent protected THC product for the market. And we also secured a license for oral formulations, but that for us right now, that is not a priority. So our pain management, obviously a very critical market, very critical right now in the whole battle against opioids. Like I said, inhalation is really, really unique because it's fast. You're really suffering from pain. You want that immediate release of the drug, and you want it to really hit your central nervous system very, very fast so that the pain doesn't bother you anymore. I don't want to be sitting on a chair or lying on a couch and, kind of in pain, waiting for the drug to kick in 1 to 2 hours. I want that relief now. And I want to be able to be functional and execute, my job, keep my job, and be able, to work and basically earn a living for my family. So this type of drug, inhaled cannabinoids, we've been able to show that this is what it'll do. Very, very fast. And obviously because we avoid the liver metabolism, what they call the first pass metabolism, we have a very low level of basically the metabolites, for example, of CBD that were linked to liver cancer, to liver toxicity. So obviously, when you get a nice safety profile like that for a drug like Quick-Sleep, then you read number 6 below. That means the FDA then says, okay, there are no, say, safety objections to moving into a second or third line therapy, which is great because ultimately in the fight against opioids, you don't want to be a third or fourth line. You eventually want to become a first line, so the opioids come after you. So this is really, for us, the race. The race is to become that, eventually that second or even first line therapy in some pain indications where people will take Quick-Sleep, and physicians obviously will think of Quick-Sleep and recommend it and prescribe it to their patients before any opioids. That to me is a major win if we can achieve that. And again, the Reborn trial, obviously this slide, I didn't update it because now it's 3 immediate release opioids. So obviously we're trying to get information on all the 3 major immediate release opioids that are prescribed by physicians. And that's key. We want to be sure we win against each one of those, and also allows us to really determine the sample size to really design a very, very strong trial and really beat the pants off the immediate release opioids. But keep in mind that the outcome of this trial is major because nobody's ever been able to show that inhaling cannabis, for example, can even be equivalent, never mind superior to morphine. So this will be very, very significant when it comes out. So we're very happy that this trial is moving very well. And our value creation, obviously, we have our steps of where we create our value. Like I said, right now, our main focus is really on our reborn trial. And obviously, this again involves quick sleeps and calms. Our next value obviously will come from the ARDS 003 drug and the ophthalmics, which, like I said, everything I do on my ARDS, obviously I'm doing to my PP03. So it's gaining value on all these fronts. And we've been doing this. This is actually a slide that was done in March. So if you look at it, we've actually been climbing those steps. And in some cases, in the case of quick sleep and calms, we're climbing extremely fast right now, which is very important for our shareholders. And that was the last slide.
Okay, Guy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, this is actually, it's fine. This is the deck you originally showed when you first came on. So you've been delivering, everything you said you would do. We're on track. Again, climbing that ladder of the milestones. Let's go into some questions. So basically, the total market opportunities you're addressing is roughly $200 billion plus between the pain.
Right.
So it's massive market opportunity. So it would be very, very interesting. Okay, I got a couple of questions that came in here. Hang on a second. Let me just pull this up. We have some live questions. We have some questions from our friend Sean Black. The Warren Buffett of Canada has sent in some questions. He wasn't able to make it. Question number one: what do you think of the Philip Morris news, which validates kind of your the theory of inhalation?
Well, for me, for sure, I think
drug delivery.
Yeah, as a drug delivery, it definitely inhalation.
And just give some background so people know what.
Yeah, Philip Morris is a tobacco company, so obviously they've been researching even cannabis from what we know from the literature for years. They've been recently doing a lot of acquisitions in the biotech front, which I think is what Mr. Sean Black is referring to. And for me as a drug developer, inhalation is very important, especially for central nervous system conditions, even epilepsy, avoiding the liver, sending the drug right away to the brain. But especially if you have massive pain, again, acute pain, I want that relief. So I don't want my drug to, sit around the body circulating before it reaches its destination. I want to go straight. And that's what inhalation does. Inhalation is a more complex space, definitely. But because of the efficacy, the efficiency, even the amount of material. I mean, if you're taking, for example, oral CBD, you're going to need 1,000 times greater amounts to deliver, say, the equivalent amount I can deliver by inhalation to the brain. So there's a big offset in the efficiency of delivery as well. So it's both speed and efficiency. And a patient wants both speed and efficiency of delivery, which also affects the cost. If I have a lower amount of active ingredient in the drug, obviously that impacts the cost of the patient.
Okay, his next question is, how is the Reborn trial going? How many patients have commenced the trial?
Well, the Reborn trial is basically going as expected. In terms of number of patients, that's not in the public domain, so I can't comment on that. But basically, we're happy. That's our priority, and that's where our energy is right now.
Okay. Next question, and then we're going to go to the live questions. What is the status of the ARDS application and sign off on protocol? When do you expect to inject the first patient?
That's another question that's not, the answer is not in the public domain. So you have to refer to our July MD&A document for our thing. So the only thing we comment is that it is in the regulatory process, and that's all we've made into the public domain for now.
Okay. And his last one of his last questions is, so when DIN number in Canada?
A DIN number? That's basically a drug identification number. All prescription drugs require that. So when we refer to what we call the new drug submission, which is the equivalent of the new drug application in the United States, or in Europe, the marketing authorization application. So each country has its own name. Here in Canada, when you get it approved, the drug, after they reviewed your new drug submission, you will get what we call a notice of compliance, an NOC, and that comes along with the infamous DIN, the drug identification number. Eventually, when your drug's been on the market, let's say 10, 15 years, you can then migrate to an OTC status, while your DIN follows you to that OTC status. But every drug has to have a DIN. Just like here in Canada, our natural products have what we call an NPN number. Same concept that the Canadian regulators created those numbers to allow pharmacists to really know the regulatory status of a product.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of, so one of the things that's coming up is Reduvo. When does that when is that going to go on the market?
So we're still optimistic that the regulator will complete the review in time. To date, everything has been as we projected, because we kind of do timelines for each division of Health Canada, how they review our files. To date, no surprises. So we haven't had any, let's say, nasty letter in terms of the need of information. So everything's been expected. I always tell people from a risk point of view, keep in mind that we're talking about a drug that is commercial in the United States. So the FDA obviously has approved the manufacturing site. So for me, obviously, if the drug is approved from an FDA approved manufacturing site, I'm not concerned when Health Canada will review that, that information. They may have questions, but I don't think that, there's any risks involved with that part. And obviously the clinical, well, we're not too worried about that, because everybody knows there's a lot of information about THC out there. So from a risk point of view, we believe that one is a low risk to getting the DIN.
Okay. But that could be shortly, basically, the next few months. Right.
That's hard to predict with the regulator, especially now that we have an election, how the election changes things. In theory, it shouldn't slow down the reviewers, but we've seen it in other departments where things do slow down. So we'll see.
Okay. So I think the kind of the takeaway on the Reduvo is that that's going to bring in immediate revenues short term, and it's not a major market, but it's a pretty decent size market in Canada.
I said the biggest part that research analysts always hook on is it shows to the market our ability to bring a drug to approval. That in itself is worth a lot more, say, than the market itself, because
it's the halo effect. It gives it adds a whole halo effect on the company overall and the whole pipeline. So exactly. I mean, I think that alone is probably worth a couple $100 million in market value, just from a psychological perspective for institutional investors and all that. Because once they see that you're able to actually do it, they more seriously.
Well, exactly. And keep in mind, one of the major issues often is the manufacturing. So again, if you look back at early on our Reduvo, we announced that we had gotten our drug establishment license for the sale and distribution of Reduvo. That's important. Sometimes that comes near the end, but we got it up front. And that to me is major, because that's another, say, of the risks that is removed for bringing Reduvo to the market.
Okay, let's start with some of the audience questions here. So, question here: how many patients out of 20 in the reborn trial would you like before you would be comfortable talking about the results once they're far enough into the trial?
Obviously, first of all, I mean, talking about the trial, say, to the board is one thing. Certainly, at a certain interim analysis, I would be discussing the results with the board. Ethically, we have to be careful what we put out to the market, because the regulator, the FDA, or even the hospital's ethics committee can view any comment on our part as a way of, how could I say, trying to convince a patient to come into a trial. So you have to be very, very careful, because these are, blinded trials, and you don't want to put a bias, and you don't want to bring in patients to what the regulators view as an unapproved drug. So it's a very difficult. I've had emails from, some patients, some shareholders that say, yeah, can't you do like other companies that, make a comment? Things are going like we planned. You can make those comments, but again, you have to be very, very careful.
Okay. Question. I guess we kind of touched on this, but how many people how many are enrolled in the reborn trial? Has the uptick in COVID, has that had any effect on slowing down enrollment? And when is the expected completion date?
No, to date on the reborn trial, we haven't seen an impact from the recent, say, COVID. Certainly where we had seen the biggest impact of COVID was on the plenitude. I think we had spoken about that at the AGM. Even the impact had been on the Drug Enforcement Agency of the delay it takes to grant Schedule I licenses to hospitals. So that had been a major delay for some of the sites of plenitude. That to me is, and that's to be expected. I guess the governments get short staff in COVID, just like every other industry. So that's where the industry overall was paying a price. Some studies, obviously, patient enrollment in plenitude had been affected because hospitals were focusing on COVID patients, and obviously you're not going to be spending time referring pain patients with cancer to a site to try an experimental drug when your priority is trying to save lives.
Okay, technical question here. Keith is asking, what are the cost savings for Tetra if Quicksleeve indeed satisfies Article 8 from the EMA?
Okay, basically the cost saving is when you can do a global clinical program, is that you don't need to do, say, 1 or 2 extra trials just to please basically a jurisdiction. So if Europe, for example, disagrees with the reborn trial designs and the FDA has a different point of view, then you're stuck because you may need 2 sets of trials to get approval. So that's major savings. Can be anywhere from 10 to 20 million of cost saving. At this point, it's still hard to estimate the total savings, but the closer the protocols are and to each other, obviously the more cost savings. And that's kind of the message we got. The governments seem to be aligning in the same direction, so that will be a cost saving to shareholders, definitely. Same thing on the manufacturing, same thing with the toxicology. If they all agree, just a simple carcinogenicity study, for example, that's $1 to $2 million of savings. So each time the regulators agree globally, that's a saving directly to the shareholders.
Okay. Any ARDS update?
Not since the MD&A of July.
Okay. Let's see what other questions we have here. Okay. Comms. Okay. It's just trying to. We get a lot of similar questions. Just trying to see the new questions here. I'm like, okay, so I don't think this is what can be said that's not in the public domain about these trials and expected news releases in the next 2 months? That's a tricky question. I like this.
Obviously, our goal at one point is to update the markets. That's obviously our responsibility. We have to be, again, careful in terms of ethics for patients. Agencies do slap you. So for sure, it might be a boring news release. So you may get, an update typically of what others do and say things are going as expected. And then obviously in the MD&A, you sometimes get a bit more of a technical type briefing. But on clinical trials, the industry standard is usually silence. So that's usually the bummer for shareholders, is you don't get really to see what's going on.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so we get that. We got okay. Any news on the new CFO coming in?
No public news to date. Obviously, we've been interviewing people and discussing with future people. So that's moving along very well.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're running about 10 minutes late. So I'm going to see if we can close off with this one, which is one of the questions we always ask. What milestones, what are the news can we expect in the next 30 to 90 days? What kind of market moving news basically is in the pipeline?
Well, I hope to have obviously an update on the status of Redugo. So that to me is, certainly before the end of our fiscal year, which is the end of November, we should have hopefully an update. I mean, we know the timeline of where things are at Health Canada. So, we do expect some news on that. Hopefully an update on the reborn trial from the CO would be certainly, I'm sure, expected by everybody. So it may be, like I said, a boring news release because I won't be able to give much detail, not to be slapped by the ethics review board or the FDA, but certainly an update that things are going as expected. So that's typically what people should expect, and some other standard news that certainly will come up over the coming weeks for sure.
Okay, you actually do a few more questions. Interesting question. So Alexander is asking. So TBP was granted 2 DINs according to news on January 2020, last 18 months for Terpacan. So he's asking, why would a DIN for Reduvo bring in a halo effect if the 2 DINs from 2020 did not?
That's a good question. First of all, the Terpacan DINs are what we call OTC DINs, so it's not a new drug submission. First of all, so it doesn't get a notice of compliance. It doesn't have the same standard. A Terpacan DIN is basically you meet what we call like in the United States, there are monographs for your over-the-counter drugs. So all that you have to show is kind of a label to the regulator, sign documents that your manufacturing conforms, say, to the GMP, and that's it. There's no scientific review of your claims. The claims are recognized in monographs. That's what Terpacan is. So Terpacan does not have an impact in any analyst's mind of the value of Tetra. Whereas, any, let's say, decent regulatory person with experience should be able to do a Terpacan type DIN. Whereas a new drug submission, that takes a whole team and a whole lot of science and effort to bring a drug to that status. And that's where the recognition comes from the analysts and overall the markets.
Okay, so a couple of points. One is, so the 2 DINs of stock doubled on that day, right? Looks like that's what it looks like.
It does. I mean, that's obviously, there's a lot of, we have a very high retail stock. So they don't
I guess Shane sums it up. So those are, so I guess the bottom line is those for over the counter. It wasn't pharmaceutical.
Yeah. But Tetra has
big difference.
Retail-based shareholders, which sometimes, view things not the same way that research analysts do. So that's.
So, yeah, big difference. Okay. Another good question. Okay. So will the inhaled CBD data be leveraged take a shot across the bow eventually at GW?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, theoretically, from a safety point of view, it is clear that with our technology and our science and everything we've shown even to regulators, we could deliver much higher levels to patients with epilepsy and in a much safer way than Epidiolex was able to do according to the public clinical data. It's not our business. We're not in that market, but certainly any company that was interested in going after stealing part of that market, a product like ours certainly could be licensed for that.
Okay. Now, back in the few months, it was about 6 weeks ago, one of the things you said in the last interview was keep your phones with you in the next few months. So Salman is asking, do we still keep our phones with us in the next 30 to 90 days?
I would say, yeah, unless you're tired of hearing it ring.
Okay. On that note, yeah, we got to do. Yeah, a lot of people are interested in that. All right, so things are looking good. So Guy, thank you again for joining us. It's been a while. Hopefully, we will get you to. We'll get an update from you the next couple of weeks.
Certainly. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, thank you, Guy. All right, so great update from Tetra, and let's get ready for our next exciting presenter. There he is, Brent, son of Logiq.
Very excited. How are you?
All right, fantastic. Let me just change up the banners here. Okay, we get everything spelled on the screen correctly. Okay, let me just get this set up over here, and I'll do a quick intro for for those people watching this later. Okay, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next super stock, a live stream for September 2nd. Back with Logiq, LGIQ, both on the over-the-counter and the Neo exchange, now in Canada. Stock is trading in Canada now. Again, this is one of the exciting stocks kind of in our little cohort. We introduced it about a year ago at $3.50, right up to about $14 and change. Recently, it's come down. There was a raise done in Canada. We always know what happens when companies raise money in Canada. There was a temporarily drop, and stock is running again. So again, Logiq, kind of it fits into our theory of what we look for in these 10 baggers. We've had already 7. Again, we're looking to come out with 10 baggers before the end of 2021. So again, companies with massive market opportunities at a key inflection point and multiple catalysts in place. And I think Logiq obviously has been meeting all those criteria. So with that said, Brent, I want to get into. I think today we're going to start off with the slides because we haven't had the slides in a while. That's kind of the official story. So you want to pop that up on the screen, and then we'll go to the Q&A. So let me just. Okay, so let's do the full. If we can do the full screen.
Yeah, I would like to, but you see my cursor there? I had hoped to actually use that within. So if you don't mind.
Okay. Is it not working?
I don't think I can use the
I'm saying what I meant was can we get rid of the sidebar? I just want to show the full slide. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want this to look as good as possible.
Yep, that didn't work. Hang on a second.
Okay.
It's always the guys at the tech companies who have the tech.
It actually is. It's interesting. The last time we had a guy who had problems with his sliding, the stock went up 1,200%.
Is that right?
Yes.
How about that?
So it's a good, multiple times actually. Actually, no. I think maybe.
There we go. How about that?
Okay, we see it. Okay, so it's a good omen that the slide is not working right. Okay, now it's working. So Brent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you run through the slides. I'm going to hop back in. We'll go through the Q&A because I think again, like for everybody that's watching it, it's your questions that really make these events special. So please ask your questions and then decide for yourself. If Logiq is going to be that next 10x to 100x winner. If it's going to be our 8th or 10th 10 bagger plus of 21. So Brent,
take it away. Okay, terrific. Thanks, Jack. Okay, so I will not read the disclaimer. It may take me a while. So what is it that Logiq does? We simplify e-commerce, and what does that mean? Well, I think most people know the prevalence of e-commerce and how important it is in the world today. We are not in e-commerce. We do not sell things or services online. What we do is we help businesses, generally smaller ones, either get online or if they're already online, sell better, identify customers, and target the most appropriate customers and be the most efficient that they can online. So our tagline is simplifying e-commerce. Highlights, I'll go through these and then I will describe the actual business. There are 4 highlights that I'd like to point out that are very important and very relevant right now. So strong profit margin improvement. If you look at the past year and you compare it to how we did since inception back in 2015, what you'll see is a tremendous improvement in gross profit margins recently. And if you look at how we did, there's obviously a lot of numbers here, and I'm going around this here with my cursor. The way to view it is, what did we do prior to, call it Q3, 4 of last year, and then how we've been doing this year? Well, historically, our margins have been in the mid-teens, so not terribly exciting. However, the past 3 quarters, we have more than doubled those. We just reported Q2, and we were in the nearly 30% range. So we've more than doubled our gross profit margins in the past year. That's important because the next bullet here, compelling valuation, we're currently trading at around 2 times revenues. And if you look at the peer group, which I'll show as we move on, the peer group is trading at approximately 23 times revenues. So combining the profit margin improvement with the valuation, what that does is it gets us in line with our peers. So last year and prior, did we deserve a discount to the peer group? Yes, I'd say so. Do we currently? I would say not, because we've improved our gross margins significantly, and we're continuing to improve them. We've stated that every quarter, and every quarter subsequently we have delivered on that. The management team, it's on our website, it's in this presentation. Very simply, if you look at the executive team and even our employee profiles, you'll see backgrounds with companies like Yahoo, Magnite, LiveRamp, Ubisoft, and a number of others. And these are former executives from very large enterprises in the tech industry. And so, why is that important? Well, I think from a credibility perspective, I think from a strategic roadmap, absolutely on a planning side, and certainly introductions of new products fitting into the market and being relevant and compelling to customers. And then finally, what I would point out is that we've just recently done our IPO on the Canadian NEO exchange, which is a senior global exchange. That has given us presence in Canada, home of Shopify, and a number of other e-commerce enablers. And more importantly, what it does is it enables us to, in a more streamlined fashion, apply to a senior exchange here in the U.S., either New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. So I suspect that people will see more about that very shortly. So what do? We have 2 lines of business, AppLogic and Data Logic. So AppLogic, in a very simple and high-level description, helps offline businesses get online. Small businesses, micro-sized businesses. We operate in emerging markets, and so most small businesses there and most consumers who access the internet use a mobile device. They don't use a laptop or desktop. So we're 100% mobile. If you look at Shopify, BigCommerce, Wix, they are almost exclusively on desktop or laptop in terms of building your store. And yes, you can access it through the mobile device, but you can't build it on the mobile device. That's extremely important because in emerging markets, if you don't have a desktop or a laptop, you can't create a Shopify site. Data Logic. What does Data Logic do? Data Logic, just by way of background, is comprised of 3 companies that we've acquired in the past year. Very simply put, that helps businesses that are already online identify customers. And those don't have to be through the mobile device, and they don't have to even be AppLogic customers. They are generally, in North America, they are generally small and medium-sized businesses that already have a presence online, but are having a really hard time competing with the giants like Amazon and eBay and Target, because in addition to buying power and pricing, the real challenge for a small to medium-sized business competing online is effectively utilizing ad dollars, because it's a very unfair playing field, which I'll shortly point out. How do we describe these in simple terms? Well, AppLogic is a Shopify for mobile, and Data Logic is a trade desk for small to medium-sized businesses. So on this example, I wanted to point out and exemplify what it is that we do different in an emerging market. So it's a problem and a solution. So one problem that I think most of our viewers in urban areas are familiar with is traffic. Traffic represents a problem not only driving around, but it represents a problem if you're ordering food or you're ordering things to be delivered. You generally want them quickly, especially if it's a lunch or a dinner or something you need to prepare either. So in a densely populated urban area, especially in countries where we operate, traffic is significantly worse than it is even here in the US, like LA or New York. So if you've got an hour for lunch and you don't want to go out and get in your car, get in your scooter, or even walk in the blistering heat, wait in line, and then go back to your office, your alternative is to order through your phone or order online. And I think most of our viewers here are familiar with an average wait time here in the US of about 45 minutes. That's no different in emerging markets, especially with the traffic being what it is. We've managed to cut that time to 14 minutes on average. And how do we do that? Well, part of it is through our platform, which we use a very specialized geofencing mechanism. And the second is we use foot-based couriers. So we have couriers that are in the urban areas that will get the order from the customer, and they will run over to the restaurant or food kiosk. They'll purchase it and run it up to the office building. And the average wait time is essentially a third of what you would find with comparable platforms. So, it offers an app to small restaurants. It enables them to compete by getting the food to their customers in a third of the time. So this is an example of how we used technology for the customer, so they don't have to wait as long. We use technology for the restaurant or food kiosk because they are now able to get the food to their customer in a third of the time. So what does that do? It enables a leveling of the playing field for a small, generally micro to small business. And I would say that just rewinding a bit, that's really what we do. I mean, we're living in an age now where the small investor is really driving the success of companies. If you look at AMC, you look at GameStop, these are driven by these Robinhood platform investors, these Reddit platform investors who are tired of hedge funds and big institutions dictating how a company can succeed in the capital markets. And so, what is that story? Well, at its core, it's a David versus Goliath story. Okay, small investors versus big funds. In the example I've just used, it's the same thing. I mean, if you're a big restaurant chain and you dominate the market, well, small restaurants that are two-person shops, how do they compete effectively? Well, we are in effect leveling the playing field. So is it a David versus Goliath story? It absolutely is. And we do so with very, very technical means and very simple means. So moving on, what is AppLogic? AppLogic has three primary products. We have Create App, which gets these small businesses online, helps them promote their products and services. That's offered in emerging markets and in 14 languages. The other two, PayLogic and GoLogic, are an e-wallet and a food delivery platform. GoLogic is what I just exemplified in the problem and solution slide. So DataLogic, what does DataLogic do? Well, we help small businesses compete against big ones. And although there's a lot of information here, I think the takeaway from this pie chart is that you look at Amazon, you look at Walmart, you look at eBay and Apple. You've got four companies that account for 53% of all e-commerce sales. You put that into perspective. I mean, there's 600,000 other companies that are involved in e-commerce, yet four of them account for well over half of the total e-commerce sales. So what does that mean? All right, so if you're a small business and you sell things that the giants also sell, you're competing on price, you're competing on customer service. But most importantly, you're also competing on ad dollars, because you have to put your money into advertising so that people can find you. And so how do the big four do it? How do the big 10 do it? How do the big 20 do it? Well, they use a platform called the Trade Desk. Most people may not have heard of it, and that's okay. It's not a household name, but it is listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol TTD. And if you look at them, it has been a huge success story in terms of stock price performance. I mean, they've come out of nowhere. They weren't even around 5 years ago. And last quarter, they did $250 million in revenues. And how is that driven? Well, they cater to the biggest e-commerce companies, and you have to have a minimum monthly advertising spend of $10 million. So if you're a small business, I mean, most of them don't even have an annual sales of $10 million. It's actually quite a reasonable amount of sales. So how in the world are they going to get onto the Trade Desk? How do they get access to this platform? And how do they get analytics and basically tools to target customers, to understand how are my ad dollars being spent? How do I compete? Well, they have a very hard time doing so. And so what we've done is, over the past year, we have built a suite of e-commerce marketing solutions by way of acquiring 3 companies. And we now run Logiq digital marketing and Logiq consumer marketing that, very simply put, increases on online sales for small to medium-sized businesses. And so what do? We give the same set of tools that the Trade Desk does, but we have a lower entry point. Our entry point is essentially $10,000 a month. And how do we get paid? Well, we charge 15% of the ad spend, and that ends up being quite meaningful. You don't see the Trade Desk coming down the chain, because for them, they're already covering all the big e-commerce sites. So it doesn't really make sense for them to go after the other 600,000 e-commerce sites to try to get business. So it leaves it pretty wide open to us. And so what I wanted to point out here is a hypothetical example of how the Trade Desk makes money, and then how we make money, and how do we help small businesses compete against the giants in terms of ad spend. Okay, so on this side over here, Trade Desk and some of the other what we call agents. In this example, if a small business wanted to buy ad space on CNN.com, okay, that ad space in the wholesale market, let's call it's $60 for a placement. Okay, the price that an agent such as the Trade Desk or others would charge, what they would get is $60. Okay, the price to the client is typically 35 to 45% markup. So the average business, including the big ones, Target, Home Depot, Amazon even, they would pay about $84 for placement. Okay. The gross profit margin to the agent is about 70% or higher. So that's why the Trade Desk stock has been such a stellar performer over the years, because they've got big gross profit margins. Okay. So over here, Logiq, through Logiq digital marketing and Logiq consumer marketing, we have access to the same ad space on CNN.com. Our price, yes, it's $60. What do? Well, we charge an extra 15% to the customer. So they pay $69, but they have full transparency. So not only are they paying 20% less, which does matter, but they also have total transparency into what the ad space is, because it's not just CNN. It's also Forbes.com. It's also Yahoo. It's any ad space that they're interested in buying. And more importantly, we help them identify that, because it's just not as simple as saying, okay, well, I want to sell solar panels. I need to target people that have done home improvement. It's much greater than that, because it's not just people who've done home improvement. If you look at the underlying demographic sets, and there's about 330 data points, you can see that that consumers fit multiple demographics. So we're helping them identify other channels and not only saving that 20%, but we're also helping them find ad campaigns that are more effective. And the analytics tools that we provide them gives them insight into that. And so, are there other things that they can buy from us? Absolutely. And are they encouraged to? Absolutely. So the reason you see gross margins of 70% to companies like the Trade Desk and others is because they've got that big markup. But incidentally, so do we, and we don't have to do the large markup. So not only are we enabling customers, giving them a better price, giving them better tools, but our margins are equally as high on this side of the business as the Trade Desk and some of the other competitors. Historical financials, you look at how we did last year. We did almost 38 million in revenues. We had gross margins that have improved significantly. So what you'll see this year, again, gross margins more than doubled from 14% last year to 29% in the similar quarter of this year. We've targeted 31% gross margins by the end of this year on revenues of between 34 to 38 million. And all that, although that is similar to what we did last year on the revenue side, we've more than doubled the gross margins. So that's, if you want to look at it simply, that's almost the equivalent of doubling sales this year over last. We've publicly stated that next year we're targeting 35% gross margins and revenues of 50 to 55 million. And including strategic acquisitions, we could do 60 to 100 million by 2024 or sooner. And we have pointed out that we are looking at strategic acquisitions now on the accretive side. So looking more for revenue and distribution channels as opposed to IP and tech. Comparative valuations, I think this is extremely interesting because if you look at where we are, I think our share price is roughly around here, 375, no, okay, 390. Market cap of about 90 million, 2.3 times revenues. If you look at our peer group, you'll see 23.6 on average. If you look up here at Shopify and the Trade Desk, and yes, they are significantly larger, they have very large enterprise value to revenue, 47 for Shopify, 44 for Trade Desk. Why is that? Because they've got huge gross margins. Well, we do too on the side of the business that we've just put together by way of those 3 acquisitions. But even companies that are smaller like Kubient, you're looking at a 13 multiple of revenue. And I think they're looking at about 35, 40% gross margins. You look at some of these other ones. You look at Wix, you look at TechTarget, you look at Magnite. They've got gross margins that are smaller than Shopify or the Trade Desk, but they also have very large valuations. And again, we're at 2.3 times revenues. So I think it's safe to say that we trade at a significant discount to the peers, and we do offer a significant upside if we trade in line. Our management team, again, I mentioned earlier, you look at the tenure of where we've worked, the average time in the business. I think that's extremely important because, although you see a lot of startups or entrepreneurial stage companies with a lot of younger folks who have great ideas, I think to point out a real challenge for people who are younger or less experienced, they have not seen up and down cycles. I mean, it's very easy to come into markets that have done extremely well and not understand how to navigate a challenge of a trough, how to navigate a challenge of a down market. How do you navigate the funding landscape? How do you strategically position? Last year was a great example. I mean, we took the opportunity to get really aggressive instead of standing back and taking a wait and see approach. to the pandemic. And as a result of that, what we did is we improved our gross margins by more than double. So I think there's a lot to be said about longevity in an industry. Looking at our board, what's important here, in addition to tenure at enterprise stage companies, two people I'm extremely proud to say have joined our board in the past 6 months. Josh Jacobs. Josh was the former head of Omnicom, which is the third largest ad agency in the world. So why is that important? Well, part of our customer acquisition strategy for Logiq is not going after these 600,000 small businesses. It's going after ad agencies that have 50, 100, 200 small to medium-sized businesses as their clients. So we go to them. They recommend our platform to their customers. So we're taking a different approach. So instead of going after the masses, we're going after the ones who handle the masses. Josh has been extremely instrumental in advising us on that. Leah Hickman, I'm sure everyone knows Adobe. I'm sure everyone's familiar with having bought packaged software from, call it Office Depot or Best Buy or Walmart in the past. But if you look at Adobe's growth over the past few years and look at how they achieved it, they moved from packaged software onto the cloud. And so they did that by the influence of Leah Hickman, who was at Adobe and is credited with moving them from the packaged software arena to the cloud. So I'm really happy to say that they joined us. They would not have put their reputations on there, as have our other directors. In short, what would an average investor see when they look at our management team and our board of directors? I think it's concurrent to what you would see at a much larger company. And so that's important, again, for the reasons I mentioned. And I think certainly to give comfort to the fact that although we are a smaller company, I think we've got a lot of big name people on board. Finally, key takeaways. Again, revenue growth and profit margin improvement will drive valuation enhancement. So expanding our gross profit margins, we're literally at the 30% level now, getting up to the 50% level. There is no reason that would not translate into a higher valuation multiple. We're already doing it. Every quarter we say we're going to, and every quarter we do it. Successful track record of M&A. Again, we've acquired 3 companies, predominantly for tech and IP. Going forward, we are focusing on acquiring revenue at low valuations and opportunistically buying some more IP to create sustainable advantage. Jack has pointed this out to our viewers that we intend to grow through acquisition. He likes to use a $100 million revenue run rate. I can't speak to that directly, but I can say that we have absolutely seen and are in discussions with companies that would get us there in a real big hurry. And the valuations are very attractive. So will we do it? Yeah, I think so. And will that benefit investors? I believe it will. Third, listing of our OTCQX shares to the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. I think that investors will see some news on that soon. And I think that would be, instead of, oh, we've applied, it will be we've been approved, or there is an initial public offering on a senior exchange here in the U.S. So I would pay attention to that as well. Again, management and board credibility. Again, we have experience that you would find at significantly larger companies, and that adds to investor confidence and credibility on the customer side and on the investor side. So with that, happy to take any questions, Jack, and go from there.
Okay, Brent, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so so let's kind of jump right into it. Actually, I saw a really great audience question, which I think is the key part of the story. Like, why, what is it going to take for this stock to be trading, at the pure multiple of 10x revenue? So in theory, this could be 400 million, 10x. So you're doing 337. So 400 million now, and if you get to 100, it'd be $1 billion. You back out from there. I think what is one of the key things here, Brent, is that really Logiq is at this point it's kind of at an inflection point where you are going to be focused more on the ad tech business, which is the data logic. That's your advertising, ad tech. I hope you don't mind if I just call it the ad tech business, but
yeah, please.
So the data logic business, we were talking before about this, and like I was like, wow, it's an incredible business. Basically, you're getting 15% of the ad spending that these clients do online, right? And before you were, I think earlier, last presentation, you talked about that you were, signing up a whole bunch of digital marketing agencies to come onto the platform. And again, so it's not like you're right now you're going after mom and pop businesses one at a time. And instead, you're going after an agency that has a client list of 100 of these businesses or whatever it is that are spending. They might be spending 10 grand a month. One guy might be spending 100 grand a month, which is not. I mean, that's not a. Those aren't big numbers, but it adds up. So I would say. You're probably going to have, if you can pick up, like, let's say, I'm going to use just a number. I'm going to throw out a number of like 100 agencies, right? Data Logiq brings in 100 agencies. Each one of these agencies is, let's say they do a, $5 million a month ad spend, right? Which is not a lot because they're getting a percent. That's small time basically. 5 million a month on ad spend is nothing when you have 20, 50 clients.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at basically five. Actually, that number might be a little bit aggressive because I'm looking at it's basically 500 million a month ad spend. But let's run with it because people are doing it. It's not like this is not crazy. I'm talking about 100 agencies. And there's thousands of these agencies spending lots of money. So let's say you got 500 million a month ad spend, right? You do 70. You're getting 15% of that. That's 75 million. I'm just ballparking these numbers. So 75 million. Your margins in that could be like, I don't know, man. It could be some pretty crazy margins. It could be 20 million a month, 20 million net.
The
30
the
million.
yeah, sure. Look, it's not out of the question. I mean, again, you look at Trade Desk. Last quarter, they reported 250 million in revenues. Those revenues are not ad spend. That's the percentage of the ad spend that their clients did. So it's absolutely possible. It's going to take us a little while to get there, but I think given where we are now,
I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to make it very simple because
Okay,
there's
sure.
a real path. There's a real path for the stock to move just based on this. Let's say the number is just 100 million revenue. 100, in other words, that business generates. They do 100. They do actually. No, what did I write down? I wrote down 200 million ad spending. All the agencies they do 200 million. So that's 15 million a month. About 15 million. Let's call $20 million a month ad spend. So they do 20 million a month ad spend. Your net sale is 3 million a month from that.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, it would
Okay.
be.
So 20 million a month ad spend is nothing. That's like easily achievable, right? So if you're getting 3 million a month, that's 36 million a year to Data Logiq. I mean, how much could you net? I mean, how much would that? That's 10 million.
Well, the gross margins on that side of the business are 70% gross margins just on the Data Logiq side. On the Logiq consumer marketing side, right now they're about 30. I mean, you would have a blended rate. But okay, just to simplify it, I mean, we've got some other products that would and services that would be coming online that literally have 90% margins. But I guess just to simplify it, I mean, could we? Are you asking could we net 10 million on that? Yeah, sure. Yeah, with that type of margin profile, yes.
Yeah, I mean, because look, the ad tech business. I mean, again, it's huge margins. Basically, like, Warren Buffett loves the advertising business historically, right? One of his big things was he liked the idea of newspapers. Back when newspapers, or now it's not newspaper, it's whatever, it's Google, whatever it is, because these businesses essentially are, what do you call it, a gross profit royalty on all business, because every business has to spend money in advertising, right? So anybody who's in business today is spending money on online advertising, pretty much like any substantial business, whether you're selling products, whether you're a service business. I mean, you might be, I don't know, a car mechanic, whatever, car repair service. How do you find a mechanic? You go on Google, whatever it is, Honda repair, my zip code. That's what people do all day, right? And what comes up is, reviews, all this other stuff, right? So every business pretty much spends money in advertising.
That's right.
What Logiq is doing is basically, your position is essentially as a toll collector on that highway. So any business at some point is going to have to spend money advertising. You're essentially enabling them to get better results. In other words, save money. They're actually saving money with your system, because you're able to optimize the ads. You're able to do all sorts of black box stuff, AI stuff that gives them better results, and which is what the whole business is all about. So basically, if you can get with these agencies, I mean, you can pick up, let's call it 200 million total ad spend. That's 30 million plus. I mean, so if you can get that 30 million plus in net for the Data Logiq business, I don't see any reason why. I mean, that alone could give this company $1 billion valuation. I mean, just that alone, that's one of the catalysts.
You're right. And incidentally, and we mentioned this on our last earnings conference call. We currently have, at that time, we had 12 customers that we had signed up in literally the first month of launch. I see all the daily reports on how they're tracking, because the stage we're in now is one where they're doing side-by-side comparisons of what they're currently doing with, say, Facebook or Google, and what we're able to give them. They're showing the effectiveness of the ad campaigns, opening up all the analytics. And within that, we're doing a pilot right now with one customer who shall remain nameless, but they are one of the ad agency's customers. Their monthly ad spend is $3.5 million a month, just one.
Oh, so Brent, we're having a problem with the internet. The internet cut out. You're saying, so their ad spend is how much per month?
$3.5 million. Not with us, but that's what their average ad spend is. That's where we're going. And this ad agency's got, probably 100 of these clients. Not all that size, but smaller, larger. But when you're talking about one customer that's doing 40 million a year in ad spend, I mean, that could be very meaningful just to get 10 of those. So what I'm pointing out is there is significant scale involved once you start to aggregate ad agencies, once they start to bring their customers online, once their customers start to see that, wow, there's a lot of value here. Not only am I getting a better price than what I've seen in the past, but it's all open to me. I actually get to see inside the black box that I know about, but I've never seen inside before. And what does that do? Well, that gives me a better return on my ad spend. That's what it's about. You're helping these small businesses target customers, find customers, sell better, become more efficient. I mean, that is it, pure and simple. And they absolutely come back to you because you're giving them something they didn't have before.
Right. They see results. I mean, basically, they see results. I mean, they're spending, before, let's say they're spending, $1,000. They're making, 2,000. Now they're spending 1,000. They're making, 3,000. So, they can see the bottom line difference. So the bottom line is, so this Data Logiq business essentially is, you're at the point now where you're ready to kind of start scaling. I think that's going to be the key story with that. Is basically, this is the next couple of months, we're going to be able to see like how fast and how far you're going to be able to scale this. We should be able to see that in the next probably 3-4 months in terms of financial results.
That's right.
So the other takeaway is like the Indonesia business, which is Logiq, right? Which is the food. That's the food. That's the slide you're talking. The food delivery, the app stuff, the ability to do the apps, the fintech stuff in Indonesia. So that business. Now you mentioned you were going to be probably spinning that off at some point.
We have said that on our calls, and I've said that on here as well. And I believe it's in the Zacks small cap research report as well. Lisa Thompson had also pointed out that that would be a catalyst for valuation enhancement. So yeah, we've been in discussions.
Yes, I mean because that type of business. I mean the value. First of all, I mean it's a very hot market, very desirable. All the tech companies want to be in Indonesia. That's like one of the last frontier in Asia for e-commerce and all that stuff. I mean, Alibaba wants to get in there. SEA is in there. Everybody wants to be in there. So you have a valuable asset. I mean, that alone could be worth by itself the current market cap of Logiq. I mean, that could be as a standalone business. So I think it probably makes sense that Logiq essentially is going to focus in on this ad tech. That's really going to be the main thing going forward. Let's say 12 months from now, it could be that Logiq is going to transform into this pure ad tech model. You're going to do M&A. You're going to acquire other, whether it's different applications, other companies that kind of improve the platform, like tuck-in acquisitions. Is that kind of the game plan?
That's the game plan.
So I don't know if I put the number into I threw it maybe because you were talking about the potential the M&A pipeline. I said, hey, could we do could you get to 100 million, which is not a big deal. It's only like you're doing almost 40 now, right? So if you pick up just a couple of these, there's a bunch of companies in the space that are doing 25, 50 million. I mean, you could literally overnight you could double the business.
Yeah, we've looked at we've spoken with and spent time with ones as small as 3.5 million and some as large as nearly 400 million. Not that we could acquire the larger ones right now, but I think one of the questions that investors have is, okay, so when your valuation falls in line with your peers, assuming you trade up to call it 200, 300 million. What's next? How do you justify going to $1 billion market cap or higher? And I've given the example of Lightspeed before and how they did it. I mean, they look.
I mean, there's a million. I mean, there's a million examples. Basically, look.
Well, maybe not a million, but there's a lot.
There's a lot. Not a million. There's a couple thousand, a couple hundred.
And just to keep it simple, it's a relatively straightforward roadmap. If you follow it, and if you have expertise in house or even advising you on key M&A. So what have we gone after? Well, we've acquired IP in tech, and now we've got a platform that I think is clearly comparable to what the trade desk has, but we've got a different customer focus.
I think it's a more desirable customer base, the small to medium.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. But it doesn't make sense for them to come down the chain because it doesn't do anything for them. But for us, it's absolutely meaningful. And so what's next for us? Well, there are other companies that we've seen, other companies we've spoken with that have revenues. They've got distribution channels. Maybe some of them are in advertising or digital marketing. They're privately held. You acquire them at a very low multiple of revenues or a very low multiple of earnings, and that's accretive. And I think investors looking at us now, they say, okay, well, sure, the stock's $4, call it. What do I do if it goes to 10? Is that too late? Should I sell it? If it goes to 20, should I sell it? I wouldn't tell anyone what to do, but I think that at those price points, at those market cap points, could we and would we make acquisitions that are larger and absolutely justify going to another level? Yeah, we will.
Okay. So I mean, it's really, I think, very possible that you could get to that 100 million run rate in the next 12 months, right? I mean, And at that point, if you have the data logic business that's doing these, again, the margins are huge there, then you would get that valuation. It wouldn't even be 10x. It could be the same thing that those other guys have, which is 20x plus. So there you have your multi-billion-dollar valuation. I mean, it's like a very, very clear map. Let's jump into a couple of audience questions. Navid is asking, is Logiq monetizing its data in any way? Also, any new verticals the company is looking at? Great to see you again, Brent.
Oh, thanks, Navid. We are monetizing our data. I cannot be specific about it right now, but we will talk about it going forward. However, in a slightly limited capacity, because it is there are competitive issues around it. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. New verticals, yes, there are. Looking very aggressively, in fact.
Okay. Brent, I think we've pretty much covered everything. So on that note, let's I want to thank you for joining today, and we're going to get an update from you hopefully in the next few weeks. We should do a follow-up with some news. Hopefully there's going to be some exciting things happening. September is always a good time in the microcap space. So on that note, Brent, I want to thank you and everybody for joining our live stream today, and we will see you on the next one.